The sun was just climbing above the horizon when Flight 214 prepared to leave the gate at Atlanta International Airport. A warm orange glow filled the glass windows of the terminal. Inside the cabin, soft overhead lights showed rows of seats, neatly aligned, each with a freshly cleaned tray table and a neatly folded safety card. A gentle hum of conversation drifted through the aisles as passengers settled in. Noah Williams sat alone by the window in seat 12A. He was 8 years old, with short, dark hair that curled at the ends and bright, curious eyes. His small backpack sat at his feet, its straps twisted slightly from the rush through security. He wore his favorite blue hoodie, one with a small rocket ship embroidered on the pocket, and held a picture of his grandparents in his hand. Today was the first time he would fly by himself. His mother had knelt beside him at the check-in counter, held his hands, and said one last time, "Use your words, stay polite, and do exactly as the crew asks." Noah had nodded, feeling both proud and a little nervous. Flight attendants moved through the cabin, making final preparations. They checked overhead bins, tapped on seatback screens, and offered gentle smiles to passengers. Vega paused at Noah's row and crouched down to speak with him. "Is this your first time flying alone, sweetie?" she asked in a soft voice. Noah nodded and showed her the picture of his grandparents. "They're waiting for me in Birmingham," he said quietly. She smiled and gave him a small pack of crayons and a coloring sheet of an airplane. The picture showed a wide-winged jet soaring past fluffy clouds. "Here," she said, slipping it into his backpack pocket. "This might help you pass the time." Noah thanked her, tucking the coloring sheet safely away. Beyond Noah, other passengers found their seats. A businessman in a gray suit adjusted his tie and checked his briefcase. Family with 2 toddlers tried to calm the restless children, offering snacks and soft toys. A teacher from nearby Decatur settled in with her laptop, ready to grade papers at 35,000 feet. An elderly couple held hands as they pointed out the window, admiring the runway lights. Each person was lost in their own thoughts and routines. United by the simple act of travel, Captain Reynolds strode down the aisle toward the cockpit. He was in his mid-40s, tall and friendly-looking, with salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed. He paused at each row, greeting passengers by name when possible, or offering a polite nod if he did not know them. He reached Noah's row and knelt beside him. "Good morning, Noah," he said, his voice calm and welcoming. "We'll be up in the air in just a few minutes. I hope you have a smooth flight." Noah looked up and offered a shy smile. "Thank you, sir." The captain patted his shoulder and turned back to head toward the cockpit. The flight attendants continued their checks. They walked the aisles, ensuring seatbelts were fastened, tray tables stowed, and seats upright. A soft chime sounded as the last of the overhead bins clicked shut. The lead flight attendant, Ms. Carter, turned to the passengers and said in a clear, reassuring voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 214 to Birmingham. We ask that you please fasten your seatbelt now and turn off all electronic devices or set them to airplane mode. We will be taking off momentarily." She paused, allowing the words to sink in, then smiled. "Thank you for choosing our airline." Another flight attendant moved through the cabin, checking on Noah one more time. She handed him a small juice box and a packet of crackers. "Here you go," she said, "just in case you get hungry." Later, Noah took them gratefully and placed them carefully under his seat. Outside the windows, the ground crew signaled to the cockpit. Flashing wands waved in a choreographed pattern as the plane prepared to push back. The engines began to rumble, a low, steady growl that vibrated through the cabin floor. Passengers felt the shift as the jet began to move backward, slowly at first, then with increasing momentum. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, and a hush fell over the rows. Noah peered out through the window. He could see the tarmac below dotted with other aircraft preparing for departure. Ground vehicles scurried like busy ants delivering baggage or refueling planes. The sky outside was streaked with pastel colors, soft pinks, purples, and golds blending into blue. Noah's heart thumped in his chest with excitement mixed with a hint of fear. The plane turned onto the taxiway. Overhead, the flight attendants took their seats and secured themselves for takeoff. Ms. Carter offered one. Last calm reminder over the intercom. Please make sure your seat belts are securely fastened. All carry-on items should be stowed under the seat in front of you or in the overhead bin. We will be airborne in just a moment. She clicked off the microphone, and the cabin returned to the gentle hum of anticipation. Noah leaned forward his seat gripping the armrests as the engine spooled up to full power. The vibration grew stronger, and the rumble turned into a roar. The plane accelerated down the runway. Noah felt his chest press back against the seat. With a sudden lift, the plane left the ground. A small cheer rose from the cabin as the nose tilted up and the earth fell away below, up among the clouds. The cabin lights brightened again. The seatbelt sign remained illuminated, but passengers relaxed. The businesswoman closed her briefcase and glanced at her phone. The teacher opened her laptop. The couple held hands once more, marveling at the gentle climb. Noah sat back, his grip loosening. He exhaled slowly, watching wisps of white clouds drift past his window. Felt like floating in a dream, Captain. Reynolds spoke over the intercom again, his voice smooth and confident. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. The skies are clear ahead, and we expect a smooth flight to Birmingham. You may now use approved electronic devices. We will begin beverage service shortly. His words felt comforting, like a warm blanket on a cold morning. Ms. Vega emerged from the galley with a cart. She moved down the aisle, offering water, coffee, tea, or juice. She poured it carefully into a small cup and placed it on his tray table. As she handed it to him, she said, "How are you doing up here?" Noah smiled. "It's amazing," he said. "I can see the clouds from so close." She nodded. "Is nice. You're doing great." Beside him, the businessman offered a friendly nod. "Enjoy your flight, young man," he said. The toddlers across the aisle were quiet now, fascinated by the pictures on the coloring sheet Ms. Vega had given him. The teacher smiled and waved at Noah. Even the couple down the row whispered their admiration. In that moment, Noah felt a warm glow of pride. He was alone, yes, but he was also surrounded by kindness. As the flight attendants continued their service, the cabin settled into a comfortable rhythm. Soft music played through the speakers at a low volume. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. Feet tapped gently to the easy melody. Noah opened his backpack and took out a small airplane model his father had given him for this trip. He clicked the pieces together carefully, his small fingers nimble with practice. The model took shape: wings, fuselage, tail. He held it up and watched the light reflect off its smooth surface. Outside, the world was a patchwork of soft white clouds and deep blue sky. It was peaceful up here, like being in a secret place, away from the busy ground below. Noah leaned his head against the window, tracing shapes in the clouds. He imagined flying an old biplane over green fields, waving at people below. He imagined taking pictures of distant mountains and vast oceans, his heart filled with dreams. Somewhere behind him, Captain Reynolds and First Officer Delgado conversed quietly in the cockpit. Their voices were muffled through the closed door, but Noah had heard them mention a clear path ahead. Everything seemed normal, exactly as it should be. He felt safe. After a while, Noah closed his eyes and rested. The gentle vibration of the engines felt like a lullaby. Passengers dozed or read books. Some watched the in-flight map showing the plane's progress. Noah drifted into thoughts of what awaited him in Birmingham, warm hugs from his grandmother, his grandfather's stories about fishing, the taste of his grandmother's famous peach cobbler. His small model airplane lay forgotten on his tray table as he smiled, calm and content. And so, the plane continued its journey high above the earth, carrying a young boy on an adventure that promised both excitement and comfort. All was well on Flight 2. The engines hummed steadily as Flight 214 cruised above the clouds. Passengers relaxed into their seats. Some read books. Some watched the in-flight map. Noah Williams folded his arms, watching puffs of white glide past his window. He felt safe, ready for the next adventure. Suddenly, a sharp alarm sounded in the cockpit. It cut through the soft cabin hum. Instinctively, flight attendants paused in the aisle. The map flickered on overhead screens. A low warning tone spun through the speakers. In the cockpit, First Officer Delgado's eyes widened. He saw Captain Reynolds slump forward in his seat. His hand fell off the yoke. His face went pale. Captain's head lolled to one side. Delgado's heart pounded. Called out in a tense voice, "Captain Reynolds? Captain, can you hear me?" No answer came. The captain's chest rose and fell unevenly. Delgado reached out and shook his shoulder. His hand felt cold against the captain's uniform. Delgado's mind raced. He pressed a button on the control. "Panel, Mayday, Mayday," he said into the radio. His voice shook just a bit. "Flight 214 to air traffic control. Medical emergency in cockpit. I need immediate assistance and priority to nearest airport." In the cabin, the flight attendants exchanged worried glances. Ms. Vega, who had been checking on Noah's coloring sheet, hurried toward the front. Her face was calm but serious. She tapped on the cockpit door. No response. She tapped again. Louder, she turned back to the aisle and called, "Everyone, please stay calm. Remain seated and fasten your seatbelts. We have a medical emergency." Passengers glanced around. A mother soothed her crying toddler. Teacher closed her laptop with a soft click. The businessman in the gray suit straightened in his seat. An elderly woman tightened her grip on her husband's hand. Whispers floated through the cabin. Medical emergency. Captain collapsed. Noah felt his stomach twist. He stood and edged closer, curious and worried. His small hoodie brushed against the back of the seat in front of him. He saw the flight attendant's face, the fear in her eyes. He remembered his mother's words. Use your words, stay polite, and do exactly as the crew asks. First Officer Delgado switched on the cockpit speaker. His voice came through the cabin speakers, steady but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your co-pilot. Captain is unwell. One need a few minutes to manage the situation. Please remain calm and in your seats. Flight attendants will provide updates shortly." A ripple of fear passed through the passengers. Some gripped the armrests. Some closed their eyes. Others stared at the seats ahead, faces pale. The plane jolted slightly as Delgado tried to stabilize the controls. In the cockpit, Delgado's training kicked in. He secured the yoke with one hand and pressed a button to level the plane. He glanced at the instruments. Altitude steady. Speed steady. He checked the emergency medical kit on the side panel and opened it. Inside were gloves, a stethoscope, a small oxygen mask. He grabbed gloves and slipped them on. With gloves on, he knelt beside the captain. He placed one hand on the captain's wrist. No pulse. Delgado's mind raced through procedures. He pulled the oxygen mask over Captain Reynolds' face. He squeezed the bag. No response. Delgado tapped the captain's chest firmly. No breath. Back in the cabin, passengers whispered. The flight attendant, Essia Vega, moved calmly down the aisle, speaking softly to each row. "Please keep your seatbelts fastened. We have a situation. The co-pilot is handling it. We will let you know as soon as possible." The map overhead flickered. The screen showed the plane drifting slightly off course. Delgado returned to the controls to correct the heading. As he did, he glanced again at the captain. Delgado took a deep breath and pressed the cockpit intercom switch. "Flight attendants, can you assist? I need room to work back here." Vega and another attendant, Ms. Carter, hurried forward. They slipped into the cockpit behind Delgado. Vega handed him a folded blanket. "For warmth," she whispered. Carter stood ready to fetch anything else. Delgado draped the blanket over Captain Reynolds' shoulders. He checked the captain's watch. Time mattered. He reached for the radio microphone again. "Mayday to air traffic control. We are requesting priority landing at the nearest airport. Medical emergency. No pilot able to control the plane alone." In the cabin, the sound of the radio crackled. Passengers exchanged startled looks. Whispered prayers filled the air. Businessman cleared his throat and offered a reassuring smile to the woman next to him. "They'll fix it. They're professionals." The teacher nodded, but her hands shook as she clasped them in her lap. Back in the cockpit, Delgado felt a tap on his shoulder. Turned to see Vega holding a small card. It detailed emergency procedures for incapacitated pilots. "Here," Vega said, pointing. "We keep this for events like this." Delgado unfolded the card. He scanned the key steps. Secure autopilot. Contact rescue. Administer first aid. Request assistance. Delgado pressed the autopilot switch and set the plane to maintain current altitude and heading. The cockpit settled into a low hum, lift automatic. Delgado exhaled, hoping the system would hold. In the cabin, a young mother said to her toddler, "See? The plane is all right. They can fly on autopilot." The toddler looked up with wide eyes and nodded. Delgado returned to the captain. He placed a pulse oximeter on the captain's finger. The reading blinked on the small screen. Low saturation. Delgado's jaw clenched. He grabbed the oxygen hose and secured the mask. He turned a small knob to increase flow. Ms. Carter had gone for water. She returned with a cup and syringe. "In case we need to inject." Delgado left the mask for a moment. He used the syringe to draw saline. He hesitated, then injected it into the captain's arm. In the aisle, Vega glanced back at the cabin. She knelt beside Noah. He looked frightened. She smiled gently. "You're doing well, Noah," she said. "Please go back to your seat and stay there until we say it's safe." Noah nodded. He returned slowly, clutching his model airplane. He sat down and buckled in. Delgado talked. "Into the radio again? We're stable on autopilot. Captain remains unresponsive. ETA to Birmingham in 12 minutes. Request paramedics meet us on runway." Outside, the sky seemed calm and endless. Inside, fear mixed with hope. The cabin was still. The toddler now hummed a tune, perhaps sensing the tension but trusting. The adults. Delgado moved to the radio panel and punched in another frequency. He spoke to emergency services. "This is Flight 214 co-pilot. We have one pilot unconscious. Prepare to meet us at Gate C5 with stretcher and crew." He clicked off and wiped sweat from his brow. The plane began a gentle descent. Passengers felt a slight drop. The flight attendant voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Birmingham due to a medical situation. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Remain calm. We will land shortly." Noah felt his heart rate settle as he heard that calm voice. He tightened his belt and closed his eyes for a moment. He pictured his grandparents waiting, safe and smiling. In the cockpit, Delgado guided the autopilot through the descent checklist. He monitored the instruments and made minor adjustments. He peered at the captain, hoping for any sign of movement. None came. Ms. Carter knelt beside Delgado. "Anything I can do?" she asked softly. Delgado shook his head. "Not yet. Thank you." Below, the runway lights glowed like a guiding path. Delgado switched off autopilot for a moment. He took the yoke in both hands and guided the plane down. The plane shuddered slightly on descent. He lined up with the runway centerline. Back in the cabin, the flight attendants returned to their stations, bracing themselves. Passengers gripped armrests, bracing for landing. Even the businesswoman closed her eyes as if in prayer. Delgado adjusted the throttles. The engines roared louder. The wheels touched down with a gentle bump. A brief cheer rose from the cabin. The plane rolled down the runway, slowing smoothly. Delgado activated the brakes and brought the plane to a safe stop near Gate C5. He set the parking brake and cut the engines. Vega opened the cockpit door and called back, "We're down." Passengers exhaled in relief. The teaching couple hugged quietly. The toddler clapped her hands. Noah closed his eyes and smiled, thankful. Outside the cockpit, paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. Delgado carefully lifted the captain into their arms. Vega knelt beside the captain's head and covered him. With a blanket, Delgado emerged into the cabin. He faced the passengers, voice steady and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your calm and patience. Captain Reynolds is receiving medical care now. The aircraft systems are in good condition. I am your co-pilot, Joseph Delgado. You will soon taxi to the gate, and you will be able to disembark. Again, thank you for your understanding." A warm round of applause filled the cabin. Passengers stood in their seats, cheering and clapping. They gave thanks to the brave crew who had handled the emergency. Noah looked at Delgado with wide eyes and mouthed, "Thank you." Delgado waved and gave him a thumbs up. The crew prepared to open the doors. As the fresh air of Birmingham swept inside, passengers gathered their belongings. The tension melted into relief. Life aboard flight 214 continued, now with a story of skill, teamwork, and courage that no one on board would ever forget. Noah felt his heart hammer in his chest as he watched the flight attendants brace themselves in the cockpit doorway. The cabin lights seemed brighter now, and every small sound echoed in the hush. He hugged his small airplane model tight against his hoodie, remembering his mother's words, "Use your words, stay polite, and do exactly as the crew asks." He took a slow breath and stood from his seat, his little legs steady despite the tremor he felt inside. Ms. Vega was the first to notice him. She knelt at the cockpit door and looked down the aisle, eyes scanning the passengers. When they met Noah's, she gave a small nod. He stepped forward, feeling hundreds of curious eyes on him, but he kept his head high. The flight attendant opened her mouth to speak, and Nolan heard his own voice before he realized he was talking. "I want to help," he said quietly, but clearly, holding out his hands. His voice was small, but there was no hesitation in it. He moved carefully into the aisle, cradling his model plane. Passengers leaned forward in their seats, some gasped, others whispered. A woman clutched her husband's arm. He gave her a reassuring squeeze. Ms. Vega rose and placed a gentle hand on Noah's shoulder. "Sweetheart, you're very brave. But are you sure?" Her voice was calm and kind. "You're just 8 years old." Noah looked up, meeting her gaze with the seriousness of someone far older. "I took junior pilot lessons with my dad. I know some basics. Please, they need help." Miss Vega's features softened. She glanced back toward the cockpit. First Officer Delgado knelt beside the captain's seat, checking monitors and pressing buttons. His forehead was damp with sweat. Miss Vega swallowed and took Noah's hand. "All right," she whispered, guiding him forward. "Stay behind me and do exactly as I say." Noah nodded and followed her down the narrow aisle. The heads of passengers turned. Many watched in awe as this small boy strode toward the heart of the emergency. He passed the coloring sheet peeking from his backpack pocket, the juice box he had barely touched, and the model plane tucked under one arm. At the cockpit door, Miss Vega tapped twice. "Sir," she called, then louder, "Sir, we have someone who may be able to help." She opened the door fully and guided Noah inside. It felt warm and cramped in there. The glow from the instrument panels lit up the small space. Levers, dials, and switches filled every surface. Noah stepped up to the control console, his feet barely reaching the metal footrest. He set down his model plane on a small ledge. The tools from the medical kit on the side flashed in his memory: oxygen mask, gloves, stethoscope. But his focus was on the controls before him. First Officer Delgado looked up, surprised. His eyes widened when he saw Noah. You're a boy," he said, voice tight but not unkind. Then he shook his head as if to wake himself. "You have experience?" Noah swallowed. "My dad taught me how to read some instruments and set autopilot on a small plane. I can try." Delgado exhaled, rubbing his eyes. He crouched to Noah's level. "All right," he said. "First, we need to get this plane back on course and keep it level. Help me with the autopilot. See that switch marked AP? That's autopilot. He pointed to a switch on the panel. Noah leaned forward and pressed the AP switch. Soft click filled the cockpit. A green light blinked on. Felt a small thrill. Delgado guided him by the shoulder. Good, now set the heading and altitude. We're at 35,000 feet and need to hold here. Turn this knob to 35,000. He showed Noah the altitude selector. The boy turned it carefully until the digital display matched. Then Delgado pointed to the heading dial and to the number that matched their flight path. Noah moved the dial, watching the heading indicator settle onto the correct course. The plane shuddered as the autopilot engaged. Outside, through the cockpit windows, the sky was calm, an endless stretch of blue and white. A gentle lift steadied the cabin. Delgado nodded at Noah. Well done. The plane is stable again. Ms. Carter, the other flight attendant, hovered. At the doorway, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She handed Delgado a small microphone. The radio, she said. Delgado took it and spoke in a calm, firm voice. Flight 214 to Birmingham Center. We are stable under autopilot, requesting guidance to nearest runway and emergency services on arrival. He clicked off the mic and glanced at Noah. Do you see the communication panel? Now it's your turn. Noah swallowed hard but pushed a button labeled COM1. He adjusted the frequency to match the tower's channel, reading the numbers against a small printed note taped above the panel. He held the mic near his mouth. Birmingham Center. This is Flight 214 co-pilot. We are on autopilot. Medical emergency. Need priority landing and services. His voice was steady, and the clear tone echoed in his ears. He clicked off the mic. Outside, a voice crackled back. Flight 214 Birmingham Center here. Descend and turn heading to 70. Runway 27 in sight. Emergency crews standing. Bye. The radio crackled with static for a moment before going silent. Noah let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Delgado gripped his shoulder. You did perfect. Keep your hand on the throttle in case we need speed adjustments. Mr. Delgado scanned the instruments again and pointed to another gauge. Airspeed. We need about 250 knots for descent. At. Drag this lever back slightly. Tat. He indicated the throttle control. Noah placed both hands on the throttle and gently pulled it back. The engine's roar softened. On the digital display, the speed gauge dropped to the correct setting. Outside the window, the clouds parted to show the green landscape below, slanted. Sunlight painted fields and rivers in gold. Delgado moved to the side to check on the captain again. He touched the captain's shoulder lightly. He was still unresponsive, but breathing more steadily with the oxygen mask. Delgado stood and said quietly, "He's stable for now." He turned back to Noah. "Great work." Behind them, Miss Carter wiped her eyes and smiled. "You're a brave kid," she said. "You've saved us." Noah blushed and looked down. He shifted on the footrest. He heard a few soft cries of relief from the cabin. He imagined passengers peeking through their seatbacks, praying or hoping. Delgado moved to the landing checklist. He read items aloud. Noah repeated each one after. Him flaps down. Landing gear check. Speed brakes armed. Noah flicked switches and levers as directed. Every motion felt important. His small fingers pressed with care. In the cabin, the flight attendants moved to reassure passengers. Miss Vega walked down the aisle. She smiled gently at each person and said, "The situation is under control. We have a very special helper up front. Please remain calm and in your seat." Some passengers smiled. Others applauded softly. A young mother caught Noah's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." Back in the cockpit, Noah and Delgado watched the runway lights grow larger. The plane began its final descent. Noah felt his stomach flutter as the ground approached. Delgado guided the control yoke, but he let Noah adjust minor angles under his watchful eye. The boy's confidence grew with each successful move. As the runway threshold slipped beneath their wheels, Noah held his breath. The landing gear touched down with a bump, and the plane rolled smoothly onto the tarmac. Trash carts and emergency vehicles lined the edges. A cheer rose from the cabin speakers. Delgado brought the plane to a stop, engaged the parking brake. and switched off the engines. He turned to Noah with a wide smile. "You did it," he said, voice thick with relief. "You really did it." Noah felt tears prick his eyes. He let out a laugh that shook with joy. He hopped down from the footrest as the cockpit door opened. Flight attendants crowded in, clapping and hugging him. Passengers in the cabin joined in, their applause warm and loud. Outside the cockpit, paramedics rushed to the captain's side. Delgado guided them, explaining the situation. Noah watched as they lifted Captain Reynolds onto a stretcher. The captain stirred and groaned but was awake. A voice came over the intercom, Ms. Vega's gentle tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have safely landed thanks to our crew and a very brave young helper. The captain is receiving care, and we will let you disembark shortly. Thank you for your calm and kindness." Noah stepped into the aisle, his small hands trembling. Passengers stood and gave him a standing ovation. The businesswoman in the gray suit blew him a kiss. The teacher wiped tears and gave him a thumbs up. Even the toddler clapped her tiny hands. Noah walked down the aisle, escorted by Ms. Vega and Ms. Carter. He felt like a hero in a dream. He reached his seat and paused, looking back at the cockpit. Delgado waved and tipped his cap. Noah waved back, beaming. Everyone in the cabin clapped again as Noah sat. Ms. Vega knelt beside him. She handed him a small pin in the shape of a golden wing. "For courage," she said. "From all of us." Noah pinned it to his hoodie carefully. He opened his backpack and took out his picture of his grandparents, showed it to Ms. Vega. "They'll be proud," he whispered. She smiled and nodded. The plane doors opened, and the bright light of the airport flooded the cabin. Emergency crews moved in, and passengers gathered their things. As Noah unbuckled his seatbelt, he realized he was still holding his airplane model. He put it in his pocket. When it was his turn, he stepped onto the jet bridge and felt the warm sun on his face. Reporters and cameras were waiting, but in that moment, Noah only thought of two people, his grandparents. He closed his eyes and promised himself he would make them proud. And he had. The airplane slowed as it rolled along the runway toward the gate. Outside, emergency vehicles stood by with flashing lights. But inside the cabin, a sense of relief filled the air. Passengers shifted in their seats, leaning forward to catch a glimpse of what was happening at the front. Noah Williams sat quietly in 1-2A, his small hands folded in his lap, his heart still pounding from the excitement of the landing. He watched as the flight attendant, Ms. Vega, exchanged nods with First Officer Delgado in the cockpit, and turned back to the cabin with a warm smile. No one spoke at first. The hum of the engines and the soft click of the seatbelt signs turning off felt loud in the sudden silence. A woman a few rows ahead, her eyes bright and brimming with tears, whispered, "Did you see that? A child helped land the plane?" Her husband nodded, squeezing her hand. "I can't believe it," he said. "At such a young age." A gentle murmur spread through the cabin as passengers exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in wonder, others quietly praising Noah. The couple with the toddlers leaned back, the children now calm after the turbulence of earlier events. One toddler pointed at the cockpit door. "Pilot kid," she said. The mother smiled and nodded. "Yes, darling. Very brave young man." Noah watched as the young mother spoke to her child, felt a small flush of pride, but he kept his gaze low. He thought of his grandparents waiting in Birmingham and imagined the look on his grandmother's face when she saw him emerge. He tried to steady his breathing, to feel normal again, but every small noise from a seatbelt clicking open too. A bag rustling reminded him of what he had just done. Flight attendants moved through the aisle, preparing to open the doors. Miss Carter, the other attendant, paused by Noah's row and knelt down so he could see her face. "You did wonderful," she said softly. "We all saw. You kept us safe." She reached into her pocket and handed him a small badge with the airline's logo and the words "Junior Hero" printed beneath. Noah's eyes widened. He took it carefully, his fingers trembling slightly, and pinned it to his hoodie. Passengers applauded quietly as the attendants finished their checks. A few brave souls stood and gave Noah a round of applause. He managed a small wave, a shy smile playing at his lips. The plane doors opened with a hiss, letting in a rush of fresh air and the bright light of the tarmac. The jet bridge connected with the aircraft, and one by one, passengers began to stand and retrieve their belongings. First Officer Delgado stepped out of the cockpit, his pilot's cap in hand, and paused to look down the aisle. His uniform was neat, but his face showed exhaustion and relief. He slowly walked forward, his eyes meeting Noah's. "Young man," he said, his voice steady but warm. "You did an exceptional job. Thank you." Noah felt a lump in his throat. He nodded, unable to find words. Delgado turned to the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, raising a hand for attention. The passengers fell silent once more. "On behalf of the crew, I want to thank you for your calm and cooperation under difficult circumstances. I especially want to thank a very special young helper. Noah Williams kept the plane steady and helped ensure our safe arrival. Thank you, Noah." A fresh round of applause filled the cabin. Some passengers stood, giving a standing ovation. Noah looked toward the cockpit door, his cheeks pink with embarrassment and pride. Once everyone had disembarked most of their carry-on items, the flight crew guided the passengers down the jet bridge into the terminal. News cameras and reporters lined the corridor just beyond the aircraft door, their microphones outstretched, cameras clicking. Eyes wide as spotlights and microphones surrounded him, Ms. Vega and Ms. Carter flanked him on either side, shielding him gently. A reporter stepped forward, her voice bright but respectful. "Noah, can you tell us how you felt when you stepped into the cockpit?" Noah swallowed hard. He looked up at the line of cameras and took a small, deep breath. "I was scared," he said, his voice soft but clear. "But I remembered what my dad taught me about the controls. I just did what I could to help." Another reporter asked, "What did you think when you saw the captain collapse?" Noah's eyes flicked toward Delgado, who gave him an encouraging nod. "I felt worried," Noah said. "I knew the first officer could help with medicine, but we needed the plane to keep flying straight. I wanted to do my part." The reporters smiled and thanked him. One woman handed him a bouquet of small balloons in bright colors, yellow, blue, green. "For you," she said, "to celebrate your bravery." Noah held them carefully, their strings curling around his wrist. Outside the terminal, a small crowd had gathered. Friends, family, and curious onlookers carried homemade signs. "Thank you, Noah." "Young hero? Flight 214's guardian angel?" Among them, an elderly couple held a sign that said, "Our future is bright." Their granddaughter tugged at her mother's hand, pointing at Noah. "That's Noah," she whispered. Noah stepped down the ramp, accompanied by the flight attendants. The crowd cheered and clapped. Some held out cameras to take photos. The applause felt endless. But Noah kept walking, balloons bobbing behind him. He spotted a familiar face, his grandmother. She stood just beyond the crowd, wearing a soft pink cardigan and holding open arms. Noah broke into a run and dashed toward her. His grandmother swept him into a hug, lifting him off his feet. "My brave boy," she said, her voice trembling. With relief and pride, she kissed his forehead. "You saved the day." Noah buried his face in her shoulder and felt tears fall, but they were happy tears. His grandfather stood beside them, tears in his eyes, clapping softly. "I always knew you'd be special," his grandfather whispered. Reporters gave them space, backing away politely. A television crew interviewed the flight attendants and First Officer Delgado, who praised Noah and described the young boy's calm and capable actions. The story would air on news channels across the country. Passengers from the flight lined up to thank the crew and to shake Noah's hand. A businessman handed Noah a small model airplane kit. "For your next adventure," said with a wink. An airline official approached and offered Noah a special uniform jacket with the airline logo. It was much too large, but Noah accepted it gratefully. He slipped his arms into the sleeves and smiled as everyone laughed in delight at how he looked like a tiny pilot. Photographers snapped pictures of him wearing the jacket, the balloons, the badge, and the model airplane he still held. Later, after the excitement settled, Noah and his grandparents walked through the airport to collect his luggage. He carried his backpack, now containing the coloring sheet, crayons, juice box, and the junior hero badge. His grandparents walked slowly, letting him lead the way. He told them every detail: how the autopilot worked, how he spoke to the radio, how the cabin had cheered. They listened with wide eyes and proud smiles. When they reached the baggage carousel, his suitcase appeared. Noah grabbed it and spun it around. "I never thought my first solo flight would be like this," he said, shaking his head in wonder. His grandmother hugged him again. "Life is full of surprises," she said. "And sometimes you have to be brave when you least expect it." Outside the airport doors, the summer sun was high, warming the pavement. A minivan with Williams. Family on the side pulled up. His grandparents helped Noah load his suitcase into the trunk. He climbed in the back seat and sat between his grandparents, still holding his balloons and model airplane. The car pulled away as people waved from the curb as the city world raced by. Noah looked out the window at the buildings and trees. He thought about the flight, the captain, the first officer, the flight attendants, and all the passengers. He thought about his dad and the junior pilot lessons that had taught him those basic steps. He felt proud but humble. He knew others had helped to dot. His grandmother reached back and squeezed his hand. "You did more than I ever could have imagined," she said. "You were a hero today." Noah smiled and nodded. He leaned his head against the window, closing his eyes for a moment. The car hummed along the road in the days that followed. Noah's story spread across the news. The airline honored him with a special ceremony, complete with a small medal and a certificate of bravery. Local newspapers ran his picture on the front page. Children at his school cheered when he returned and sat with him at the lunch table. He answered questions, shared his model airplane kit, and encouraged others to face fears with calm and kindness. But for Noah, the real reward was in the simple things: the hug of his grandmother, the proud smile of his grandfather, the small badge he wore on his hoodie every day. He knew he had stepped up when it mattered most, and that courage could come in small packages. As his grandparents drove him home, he squeezed his model airplane and felt ready for any adventure life might bring. The world felt big, but not too big for him anymore, and he knew that, no matter what, he would always remember the day he helped save Flight 214. Noah sat in the back seat of his grandparents' car, the afternoon sun warm on his face. His model airplane rested in his lap, and the junior hero badge glittered on his hoodie. Every time he looked at it, he remembered the bright lights of the runway and the hush in the cabin. As he stepped into the cockpit, his grandmother glanced back and smiled. "How do you feel now, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Noah thought for a moment. Still amazed, he said, "I can't believe it all happened." His grandfather drove steadily down the road toward their cozy home in Birmingham. Outside the window, summer flowers nodded in. The breeze and children played in front yards. The world looked the same as always, yet to Noah it felt different. He had discovered something new about himself, that even a small boy could make a big difference when people needed help. When they reached home, his grandmother unlocked the front door and led Noah inside. The familiar scent of peach cobbler, baking in the oven, filled the air. His grandfather carried in Noah's suitcase and set it by the hallway. "Welcome home, hero," he said, ruffling Noah's hair. Noah grinned, feeling both proud and shy. In the living room, his parents waited. His mother rushed forward and swept him into a tight hug. "Oh, Noah, we're so proud," she whispered into his ear. His father wrapped him in a gentle embrace, his eyes misty. "You were brave beyond words," he said. Noah's cheeks warmed at their praise. He looked down at the badge on his hoodie, and his father smiled, as if sharing his silent pride. They all sat down together at the big wooden table. Noah's grandmother brought out her famous peach cobbler with a scoop of vanilla ice cream on top. The sweet aroma made Noah's stomach rumble. He took a spoonful and savored the warm, juicy peaches. "This is the best reward ever," he said around a mouthful. Laughter filled the room, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly normal again. After dessert, Noah's mother set out a few envelopes on the table. One was from the airline, another from the governor's office, and a third from the local school board. Noah opened the airline envelope first. Inside was a certificate of bravery with his name printed in bold letters and a medal shaped like a wing. His eyes sparkled. He touched the shiny metal gently as if it might disappear. "I can't wait to show my friends," he said. His father opened the governor's letter, praised Noah's quick thinking, and invited him to a special ceremony at the state capitol. His mother read the school board's letter aloud. They wanted to honor him at the next assembly and make him an honorary member of the safety patrol. Noah swallowed hard at all this excitement. "Do I really have to speak in front of everyone?" he asked, voice small. His father patted his arm. "Only if you want to," he said. "You can tell them how you felt and what you learned." That evening, as the family gathered in the cozy living room, Noah's grandmother knitted a small blanket for his stuffed bear. She paused, looking at Noah. "You know," she said kindly, "courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done, even when you're afraid." Noah nodded, remembering the beat of his own heart as he entered the cockpit. He felt proud to have faced his fear. Later, Noah lay in bed, the soft glow of his nightlight casting gentle shadows on the walls. His model airplane sat on the shelf beside him, and the junior hero badge lay on his bedside table. He thought about the passengers who had cheered for him, the captain who had recovered, and the first officer who had guided him. He thought about the flight attendants who had trusted him to help. He thought about how his mother's words, "Use your words, stay polite, and do exactly as the crew asks," had carried him through. As he drifted towards sleep, he imagined himself soaring above the clouds in a little plane, helping people in need, guiding an aircraft to safety. He dreamed of wide blue skies and endless possibilities. And he knew that no matter what adventures lay ahead, he would remember the day he stepped up and helped save Flight 214. The next morning brought a gentle calm. Noah dressed in his school uniform, the honorary safety patrol sash pinned neatly across his chest. His parents walked him to the front door, and his grandmother handed him a small packed lunch with notes of encouragement tucked inside. "You'll do great," she said. "Just be yourself." At school, students gathered in the gym for the morning assembly. When the principal called Noah's name, the room erupted in applause. His friends cheered as he walked to the stage. He felt his heart flutter, but he remembered his training speak clearly. Take a breath, smile. He faced the audience of classmates, teachers, and even a few local reporters. He held the microphone in his small hands and began, "I want to thank everyone for being so kind," he said, his voice steady. "I was nervous when the captain collapsed, but I remembered my lessons with my dad. I just did what I could to help. If anyone ever needs help, don't be afraid to speak up and try." The crowd listened, rapt, then burst into cheers again when he finished. He waved shyly, his cheeks warming. Over the following weeks, Noah settled back into his routine. He went to math class, played soccer at recess, and helped the safety patrol guide younger students across the hallways. The badge on his hoodie stayed in place, and each morning he felt a quiet confidence. He still dreamed of flying one day, becoming a real pilot, but he also knew that courage and kindness mattered as much as any skill. His grandparents often took him to the small park where they had first taught him to skip stones and watch the clouds. They talked about weather patterns and navigation, sparking his curiosity further. His father continued with the junior pilot lessons on weekends, teaching him new instruments and controls. Noah listened eagerly, his small hands learning the maps and charts. Months passed, and articles in the paper celebrated the anniversary of that emergency landing. Flight 214 became a story of hope and calm under pressure. The airline published a short video reenactment for training new flight crews, praising the teamwork that had saved lives. And at the center of it was Noah, 8-year-old boy whose bravery had guided an aircraft safely to the ground. But to Noah, the real story was simpler. It was about trust, practice, and kindness. some crayons and juice, the first officer who guided him through the autopilot switch, and the passengers who stayed calm and cheered. It was about the captain who recovered and thanked him later with a gentle nod. One clear morning, Noah stood by the edge of the park lake with his model airplane. He held it overhead and let it glide through the air. The little plane swooped low, then rose again, catching the soft breeze. Noah watched it circle twice before landing in the grass. A smile spread across his face. He picked it up and tucked it under his arm, feeling both its weight and its promise. He knew that life would bring new challenges, some big, some small. But he also knew that bravery didn't come from size or age. It came from the heart. He would carry that lesson with him, wherever he went, flying high on the wings of courage.